Hi, I'm Jo Fuller. I'd like to ask the members of our panel to introduce themselves if they would.
My name's Jessica Varela.
And I'm Maxwell.
I'm Shamila Falzon.
I'm Liam Dooley.
I'm Jules Jasper-Zalaus.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on what always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and respect the traditional custodians of the land. These panel discussions follow on from the Courageous Conversation series of modules. It is an opportunity for us to explore in more depth some of the issues that we raised in those sessions. But before we start, I'd just like to say that please be aware some of the material we talk about might be confronting or triggering, so please look after yourselves in this process. This is the gender reveal party. We're going to talk about how and when gender stereotyping starts. Okay. So the first thing, I'd like you all to imagine that we're heading off to a gender reveal party, and we're very excited because we are going to hear and meet people who are having a baby that are very close to us. There's lots of joy and excitement. There's going to be food, silly games and bubbles, but we all have hopes and expectations for that baby. So could you just talk to us a little bit about what those expectations and hopes might be?
So look, I think expectations are, regardless of whether it's a boy or a girl, that they can be, that they can grow up or be born into a safe environment where they're respected and hopefully treated equally. I think that's fundamental. And I think, again, regardless if it's a boy or a girl, being born into a society where there's no pressure that they have to conform to one particular way of, certain society expectations of what it is to be a boy or a girl or a man and woman, that they can live with freedom to choose and to live the life they want to within that safe, supporting environment. Yeah.
So we all hope that they're healthy and they're safe and that everything goes well and that they can be whatever they want to be. Yeah.
See, now, my mind had gone there first, but my initial reaction when you said I was going to a gender reveal party was, how do I know what to buy them?
Oh.
The boy toy or the girl toy?
Oh.
And then I got on to the next step of thinking,
hey, that's gender stereotyping.
Yeah.
Right from that point.
And clothes, right? Like because I've got a boy and a girl, and I always think, oh, the girls' clothes are so cute because they've got the frilly bottoms and the pink dresses, and I go, whoa, like that's, stereotyping again. And then the boys' clothes are always the dark colors with like animal prints on them, and that's that's what you end up dressing your kids, because people always go, oh, is it a boy or a girl? And then when they first see the baby and how they address the baby.
and then you see the green and the yellow babies, and that's the people who weren't sure, so they went shopping early.
Yes.
And went neutral.
Yeah.
Or don't want to identify.
Yeah.
Well, that's a new one, right? Like people not wanting to identify the gender of their baby. And I actually had an experience where working with a not-for-profit, and I was like, they're like, I have a child, and I go, I do too, and you're trying to, have this relational conversation, and automatically I asked them, is it a boy or a girl? And they're like, no, we're raising them gender neutral, so they are their name, and then I'm like, okay, and then the whole conversation, I'm like self-conscious to call the baby they, because that's what they're trying to do, the family. It's like, oh, this is interesting. This is my first kind of foray into this new world of gender neutrality in practice, as opposed to in theory with adults,
I think that one story shows why this is such a complicated and important conversation to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you think that the expectations change, for example, if you look through the gender lens? So do the expectations change if you know you're having a boy?
I'd like to have a go at answering that. I had 3 boys, and I'd say I was feeling that there was this expectation from family and friends that I would have a girl.
Oh.
Because I was, I think, with my third son, I found it really confronting and like a bit. I was almost offended that people felt that I lacked a daughter in my life, and if I had a son, then I don't know, I would be missing something. I think for me, if looking at the gendered lens, when I found out that I was having a a boy, and this is for my second child only because I wanted to get the nursery and everything ready, make sure that I didn't have to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe of girl clothes. But for me, I felt like I'm having a mum's boy. He's going to look after me. And having this, these courageous conversations, this is a conversation that you have with yourself of, have I been doing that? I did feel like, and having 3 boys, I do feel like they will look after me because boys will do that with their mums. It's that relationship of boys are going to look after their mums. There's that expectation, I suppose, from me that they will do that. And if I had have had a daughter, she may have very well, and she probably would have been, a daddy's girl.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Those stereotypes are really interesting because I didn't really know what I was, having. I never did the gender scan. So when I had my son, there was this whole expectation, because he runs around, boys are more active. So it was more expected out of him. But my daughter did the same thing, and the same kind of language wasn't used for her. It was just, she's just really curious. Or boys are more rough and tumble. She did the same thing. She's just active. Like this whole kind of expectation of...
It's a different narrative.
It's a different narrative
Yeah,
of his behaviour and who he...
And before we started, Shimali, you were talking about that in some countries finding out the gender of babies is illegal.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit more?
Oh, it's interesting because I'm from a South Asian background. And so because of social expectations around dowry and even legal expectations on who's technically the head of the family and who will lead the family, boys are preferred in some cultures quite overtly than girls. So then finding the gender of a baby can then lead to sex-selective abortions. And that means that countries have then made it illegal because they're starting to, 1, it's a human rights violation.
Yeah.
But 2, it's actually leading to quite skewed community populations.
Yeah, so
where
we've got
there's more
different
boys.
Demographics.
Yeah,
yeah.
there's more boys than girls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite markedly, not like,
Yeah.
And they've kind of shown that with like worldwide data analysis across certain countries. So, I mean, that kind of, that kind of brings up a bit of a sadness sometimes to some communities if you have a girl that they have because of they've passed. But then I think, I also think, it happens in all cultures, we do that whole expectation thing of what we think a boy, like daddy's girl and a mama's boy. And if you have a girl, she's more likely to look after you and those kinds of conversations we have.
I think jumping forward to that, growing up, I was what you would have called a tomboy.
Yeah.
And so that expectation of the dialogue that happens from your parents then puts all this language in your head about what being a female is or what being a girl is.
Yeah.
And I felt like I got it wrong my whole life because of all the labels. Like I was even given, my identity was taken away because I was called Fred because I wasn't girl enough. And that what that does to little girls all the way through, and then you change your whole personality and you change how you see the world and then you change how you interact, I think has a profound impact on your self-identity, your self-worth. And it comes from, I don't think parents do it on purpose. It just becomes... It's become a part of our culture, becomes part of our language, and then it has this huge impact. And I think that's the stuff we need to start talking about because that expectation, and I'm a parent, I've made some of those same mistakes. So I'm not saying this as an accusation to parents because I've made the same mistakes myself, even having experienced it on the other side. But if we don't start talking about it and actually naming those small little things that we have to do differently, we're going to keep doing the cycle and we're stripping away what it means to be a girl or what it means to be a boy. And we're saying that you have to be in these boxes. And we're putting them in boxes. And if you're not in that box, then you're other. and you're different, and then you're questioning yourself all the time,
And feeling like you fundamentally don't fit.
or that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And if you're wrong
Yeah.
and you feel wrong, and somebody comes along and continues to tell you that you are wrong,
Yeah.
then you don't question what they do to you,
Yeah.
because you already are questioning yourself. And so it just then allows you to be vulnerable all the time.
Yeah.
Or you become so hard that other people see you as distant, and you separate yourself from society. So, there's different pathways that you take, but you still are vulnerable either way.
And it has a long-term impact.
It has a profoundly long-term impact on people, and I think that this is the stuff that we need to talk about, because I think that kind of the gender box is what needs to be broken. There shouldn't be a way. A girl is in a certain way. It's a part. It's a mechanic. It's not a way of being.
Yep.
It's a biological system. It's not a way of being. And there shouldn't be, you have to wear a certain way or behave a certain way. It's a biological part. It's not necessarily a way of being, and that's what we need to start talking about.
Interested too, like Shimali talked about the difference between your son and your daughter. I'm going to ask now that we throw to the clip, and I'm going to read it out. And she says she remembers chatting to one of the other mums when they heard a loud noise approaching. It was a nurse bringing their 2 screaming babies. The nurse handed her neighbour a blue-wrapped baby, who was Gary, with approval, saying he had a cracking pair of lungs. But her own daughter, who was making exactly the same sound, was passed over with an audible tutting, and the nurse said, she's the noisiest of the lot, she's not very ladylike. So at 10 minutes old, my tiny daughter had a very early experience of how gendered the world is. Kind of sets you up right from the beginning, doesn't it?
It just, automatically, I feel like this is the story of my life in some ways, the loud one, the noisy one, the one that was a bit too hyperactive. That's not very ladylike. You kind of question, well, what does it mean then to be ladylike? What does that mean? Is there something wrong with me? And it takes you a few years to unpack that. No, it's all good, But it's, girls aren't allowed to be loud and noisy and upfront. And then when we talk about those gender stereotypes later on, and you think about as adults, you're trying to negotiate for that pay rise, and you say, oh, women won't go up and be confident, and women won't go up and be assertive. And you kind of go, well, that story kind of tells you how many times you're told that is not an expected thing.
And on the other hand, men are told that that's really good qualities about them, so it's the same behaviour, but it's perceived completely differently if it's a man or a woman. Yeah.
What if you're a guy, or what if you're a boy that's softly spoken and quiet, and that's just your nature? You're just that little a quiet kid in the corner, and you're told, no, that's also wrong. You've got to be this assertive, loud person to be considered a boy.
It goes back to what Jules was saying, that it's a very narrow box of what's considered, to be a man or to be a woman, and when you start to break out of that, then it's very uncomfortable, and often there can be a disadvantage in doing that, which is,
I think we have an image that actually shows that. If you can see, the boy there is being portrayed as a scholar, and the girl is being portrayed as a social butterfly.
It goes on your upbringing. I mean, I was very fortunate to go to a single sex, so a female only, high school, and every day we were told that we could strive to achieve, our dreams and be, whoever we wanted to be, and that was kind of drilled in.
Yep.
But that, I suppose, that was the education that I had. So looking at this, I mean, I wouldn't buy into that. As a mother of 3 boys, I would look at that and say, I don't know which of my 3 boys need to be the little scholar. I'd rather them just be them.
Absolutely. So I think the next clip that we're going to show is it's quite a confronting video, and it's about how we behave towards boys and what the impact is on girls when they see that kind of behaviour.
Decided online to put it in the order of 250 years. Come on then. What happened?
Got detention, just for flicking up a girl's skirt.
What? That's it.
Doesn't she know that's just boys being boys?
Yeah, I mean, I've already accepted that as I grow up, I'll probably be harassed and even abused.
Sorry. That's not what I meant.
Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Yeah. It's kind of confronting, that one, isn't it? Because boys will be boys, but what message is that sending to our girls?
I think it's confronting because it seems ridiculous to see it so obviously put like that, but that's kind of what happens every day. It's, you know, women accepting certain behaviour and, you know, men not being, or young boys not being challenged about doing things that are disrespectful, and seeing it as boys will be boys just, you know, permits or condones that kind of behaviour and doesn't challenge it or change it.
I think it's a great ad.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic because those kind of comments happen every single moment.
Yeah.
And young women, whether we like it or not, or want to admit it or not, even ones that are in private schools, like you said, Jess, or you think aren't exposed to it, are exposed to those comments all the time, where they think they should accept that your skirt got blown up or pulled up, or you got told to pick up the pen so that your top could be lowered, and that you shouldn't you should accept that behaviour.
Or he only punched you because he likes you.
Yeah. Or
how many times have we heard that?
The first injury I had was a broken arm because a boy threw me over his shoulder, and he told me it was because he liked me. That was the first time I got injured. And when I told the teacher at school, it happened on the way to school. I was 4.5 years old and I was walking to school, and I told her, she said, it's because he likes you. That was the answer I was given.
Yeah.
And when I talked to my mum about it, and she said, boys always do that. And so that's the message you get straight away.
Yeah.
They pulled your hair. And I remember my nan saying, "Oh yes, that happened in my day. They used to dip it in the inkwell."
Yep.
I didn't know what an inkwell was, to be honest with you, but I didn't know what an
I
inkwell.
do.
Time.
It was definitely a different time, but
yeah, example of the same thing.
So I mean, I think that if we don't spell it out black and white like that, then people aren't going to think. And so at first that dad's going, "Oh, really? Seriously? You got in trouble for that?" And then the little boy going, "Yeah, don't they know? That's just us being us." And then the little girl having to say, "No, we already accept that this is this." And he's going, "Oh, wow. Yeah, okay, that's the message I'm giving you." I think we have to point it out because that is exactly what we're being told.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're right, it's a brilliant ad, but in reality, the conversation would have stopped after the boys said boys will be boys. She would have thought that, but probably not have said it in a real situation.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And that, which is part of the problem.
Well, it does, and I think as men, we don't understand what that experience is day to day for women or girls, and so I think that's, as you say, it probably wouldn't have been mentioned, and the dad probably wouldn't have thought anything of it, and it just continues, and
Continues into adulthood as well, because I remember a couple of years ago I was travelling by myself I was in Easter Island, and I met a guy. We went out for dinner, and I said to him, if I hadn't met you, I wouldn't have been able to come out for dinner. And he was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because I can't walk around by myself after dark because I don't feel safe." And it had never entered his mind that women think about that kind of thing constantly. We travelled the same kind of exotic destinations, but I was always concerned and constrained by how men might behave towards me, as opposed to him just going off doing whatever he wanted. And I think that was a bit of a life-changing moment for him as well, actually. Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to throw to a video about gender stereotypes in advertising. some of those just make me cringe. Sorry, I just feel quite sick watching some of those. Yeah, you guys?
I remember when the American Apparel ads actually came out, and it was just really, that was one of the more tame images from American Apparel, the lady in the swimsuit and open for business. And I'm just going, this is appalling. And the Dolce & Gabbana ad, yeah, again, that was just really like, oh my gosh. Just how women were like sexualized, but also how men were like put in like the aggressor, but just enough to kind of get us subliminally going, oh, but then, yeah, it just felt really wrong. There was also, I also remember an ad, I don't know, I think it was for a fragrance, where a woman was in a trunk of a car with her feet hanging out and the man was standing there. It was just like, yeah, it's supposedly a cool image, but you're also kind of like stimulating that a woman's been killed here. Like it's just so, the violence, the normalization of that sexualization and violence against women is just,
Yeah, it's not just about gender anymore. Some of those ads were about violence. Like
yeah, they were about violence.
Yeah, the submissive, like there was one ad that I remember where a woman was in like a dog collar, and there were men leading her around. Like it was just like it moves from being a gender stereotype to being almost subversively permitting violence against women by saying that this is normal behaviour. Yeah,
And sorry, no, go.
I think the sad thing for me is that we've just become so desensitised to it that we just don't even react to some of it anymore. I think that's what's most frightening for me, is that we see it, but we're not even seeing necessarily what the position the woman's in, or that there's big guns in it, that we're just so used to seeing. It started so little, like it started so subtly, that the escalation is just so normal now that we expect. Like I remember seeing some of those clips where, it was like, what are they selling? And I could pick that it was a car sale because we expect it to be that ad because that's what we've been trained to watch, even though we shouldn't be. And I think I was horrified that I could pick most of the ads. And I don't even watch ads. I don't watch free-to-air TV. And when I do, I fast forward all the ads because I don't want to watch them. I just think we're so desensitised that we don't see it anymore. And I think that's the danger for me, that if we're not even seeing it, we're not noticing it, we're not noticing that women are in those positions, that men are portrayed as violent, and that this is what our society is saying is normal behaviour, what's it going to escalate to?
absolutely.
Because nobody's talking about it, nobody's seeing it.
Yep.
And companies are saying this is okay.
Yep.
Companies are saying it's okay to sell my product by saying it's okay to treat women like this, and it's okay to say men should be like this.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that say about us?
What does it say about society? Liam, you're going to say something earlier?
Oh, no, I'm just thinking, going on from your point, that, we talked earlier about the messages that young people receive or how early these reinforcements of gender come in, and advertising, kids and everyone is exposed to that day to day, like, whether it's driving past billboards or might be watching ads on TV. So it just shows that these messages just bombard you all the time, and that's how these things are recreated, because we absorb it, and a lot of young people don't have those skills to really critique what they see, and this is the kind of thing that they get exposed to. But I think in some ways we are getting some positive examples of people starting to challenge it, and I think the American Apparel example was one where I remember that there was a really big social media uproar about it, and the ad actually got pulled, which I think just shows that we can all do something to help keep companies accountable and keep advertising accountable, so that hopefully the message starts to get through that, slowly, so society just doesn't want to accept this, and they want to see advertising that isn't, reinforcing these issues that can lead to much bigger problems like violence against women.
Do you think there has been a shift?
sometimes you think so,
Yeah.
but then you see a really horrible one
Yeah,
that you
I
go,
know,
all
it's
right,
like, what the hell's
maybe
going
we
on?
haven't come that far. And I think advertising, like there's some really powerful, probably the worst examples that you'll see. But I think a lot of the time, even advertising that reinforces, women as carers or women as cleaners of the house and things. And I take a lot of issue with that for different reasons. Like that one, because it forces, the stereotype of women being the housemakers, and that you want to make sure that they've got the best cleaning products that they can, so they can clean the best that they can. But a lot of those ads actually paint men in a really negative light as well. I've noticed, which there's more is coming up, that you see that ads are showing men as being sort of really inept and buffoons, and you see in the household, the woman's sort of the cleaner and the guy's this kind of fumbling idiot that, and so advertising is actually really putting a low bar for men as well, which I think if they just started to flip it, I mean, I think if I was running a company, I think doing an ad where you're showing the man doing the cleaning at home would be a pretty good way to sell more products and stand yourself apart. So I think they can get a lot more creative in starting to actually paint a good message, but probably do what they want to do, which is sell some stuff. So yeah, I think they need to start turning it on its head and starting to look at it a different way.
The impact question, I wonder, like it normalizes men as aggressive and women as passive, then it kind of takes us a bit okay that if that's, it kind of adds to that, what do you call it, like layering effect, I feel like, that if this is okay, then this is okay, then ultimate violence, that happens in real life is okay, because we've already kind of, as you said, we've already kind of gone so far down this path where we're absorbing media, we're seeing images where, yeah, they're glossy, they're stylized. So if I'm just that little bit of more aggressive, then that's okay, because that's what the world is telling me.
Well, we're objects.
We're objects, yeah.
We're owned. We're objects, and we can be treated however we want to be. That they want to treat us.
Yeah.
So
and
then the
impact of that
violence
is
against women is actually not very.
Well, it's not even a step. It's a hairline between. Well, when you're an object, I can pick up an object and put it wherever I want to put it. If I own something, if I want to put something I own in a cupboard, I can, because it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And that's the impact of what that messaging tells us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says that women are objects and you can do whatever you want to them. And so if that's what everything I'm being told about myself, then how do I fight against that?
Yeah. And as a boy, if that's what you're told, that's how you're supposed to look at women, then yeah, it's okay if I keep looking at women that way too, because a girl's like, that's how I want to be. If that's okay for people to look at me like that, then that's how I've desired to be looked at. And for a boy, it's like, yep, that's how I should look at women. What was playing through my head, the Lynx ad, spray yourself on this and girls will love you and they'll come, it kind of portrays boys as, always wanting to be the hypersexual, and girls is a little bit like, it kind of plays on that hypersexuality of boys, and that girls will just respond to that really easily and really well, and that's how girls want you to be. That kind of trope really, really well as well. Do you guys remember the Lynx ads? Yeah. And I just kind of go, it plays on that kind of, that imagery and that kind of social stereotype of what boys and girls want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah.
We've got one more video that we're going to show, and then, we'll go from there.
In that moment, what really hit me was that the way that women dress actually has nothing to do with sexual harassment. It's actually everything to do with being in a patriarchal society where men feel entitled to women and their bodies.
Being told you're aggressive.
You're too passionate.
You're too blunt.
You're too emotional.
Whereas like a man's been told that he's assertive or he knows what he wants.
Not be offensive, not hurt anybody's feelings.
You're too sensitive.
Read, but not too much. My mum used to say to me, you're intelligent and you should watch out. Men will find that offensive. So you'll have to learn to hide it.
This idea that girls needed to be perfect. I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not lovable enough.
You know your place. You look a certain way. You will never be treated with the same respect or acknowledged for the work that you do. Quite the same as a man. But that's okay because you're supposed to be happy with that.
If I didn't listen to my parents, my mum would actually get the blame for my behaviour. It was like, well, you didn't raise your daughter right. The ownership has always been on the female to sort of behave correctly.
It's very frustrating having to police my own behaviour. I get really angry about it, and I feel sort of hopeless and helpless about it.
So you always feel like you're not deserving or worthy enough. You're constantly in a state of feeling guilty for wanting certain things for yourself and for not wanting to give other things to other people.
Being 18 and going out clubbing for the first time and having a guy just completely lean over us and harass us and be incredibly creepy. And he grabbed my friend's face and licked it. Like, none of us felt like staying out for the night, but we were all too scared to leave because we thought he'd be waiting outside.
I feel unsafe as a woman when I'm walking home.
And especially late at night when I'm walking to my car.
I used to run, and I feel like I can't do that at night because I need to be sure and aware. I need to always know where I am and who's around me.
I'm constantly turning my head. Is there someone walking behind me?
I just put on this facade that I'm a super strong woman, but I'm shit scared inside.
I think that I'm going to be the kind of person who would snap back with a witty one-liner, but usually I'm like a possum. Like in my head, I'm Spitfire, but in reality, I just shut down.
I was 19 years old. I had just served a group of men. For some reason, the coaster fell on the ground. So I had knelt down to retrieve the coaster, and all I heard was, while you're down there. I can't explain how humiliated, how infuriated I was just being down there and knowing that I had to compose myself and be professional.
That anger is good, and it can rub people the wrong way, but at least it's getting people talking about it.
It starts with conversation.
You know, little by little, things can happen.
Making my voice stronger, not to turn a blind eye.
The more voices you get, the more difference that you get, and allow that to be part of it and have empathy for those people, the stronger we'll all be.
It's just trying to be as loud as I possibly can.
You're beautiful and you're powerful and you're terrifying. And that's great. And you don't need to be any smaller or any easier to digest for anybody else.
I know the life that I don't want. I've seen how so many stories have played out where people have adopted the story that somebody else wants to write for them. And so for me, that's what gives me the fire to keep going.
It's very powerful. What advice would you give everybody about how they can change the current situation? How can we change it?
I mean, to be really simple and basic, if you're raising children and you happen to be blessed with boys and girls, give them the diversity of chores. Get your girl out there doing yard work if you have a yard, and get your boy in doing dishes and laundry, and make sure the chores are evenly spread that way so you're not stereotyping that way.
Yeah.
And be prepared to talk to them too about, fortunately Fireman Sam has moved a bit and Postman Pat has shifted a bit, but we had we put them in front of the electronic babysitter and get them to watch shows that reinforce the stereotypes. Yeah. Be open to talking about your children about the fact that, women can be firemen too, and and anything at all.
Boys can be princes.
And princesses.
And princesses.
It's important to be critical of those kind of messages that are coming through because, as we were talking about before, often these things happen without us even noticing. So I think taking the time to think about whether it's what your kids are digesting, but even what you're digesting, and small ways that you can, whether it's getting kids to watch more, positive messages or even the things you expose yourself to, I think will go a long way. And small ways you can challenge it along the way is going to be powerful as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
I think
some of the messages are subtle. That's part of the issue, isn't it? And as Jill said before, sometimes it's so subtle that you don't realise that it's actually influencing the way you're thinking. It's the really obvious ones that you go, oh, whoa, hold on. But some of those subtle messages, we have to kind of just stop and think, what message is that sending and how is that limiting everybody? Yeah.
I think starting to understand your own thoughts as well. We all have them, so we all have our own upbringing and our own understanding of the world, and start challenging that. Like, just, it doesn't have to be static. Just because you've always believed something or always thought that a way is the way, it doesn't have to be the same. So start challenging the way you think and what you've been exposed to, and be open to that. And I think just be open to having the conversation. And I think if you're open to having the conversation, then we can start that conversation.
Absolutely.
And so if everybody is open to it, and then somebody's brave enough to start the conversation, I think that's the two biggest components. So if one person is brave to start the conversation and the other person is brave enough to be open to listen to the conversation, then we're going to have movement, and true movement. And so I think that would be my advice.
Great. Thank you for joining us with this session, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session.